was going to talk here about going forth. And the way it can work is I want to talk about some important things to know about the math standards, and then some things we can do going forth. And then I want to leave time for your questions about math or anything else, or broader questions about the standards, or continuing conversations like we had this morning about challenges of implementation, whatever those might be, and give you time to talk. But before I dive in, I just wanted to again thank Misha and Jenny and the Northern Nevada Math Council for having me here at this great day. Thank you very much. And my great hosts, Amy, Tracy, and Mike, have made everything run really smoothly, and I appreciate that. And it's just been great to hang out with the teachers and community leaders here. So it's been a lot of fun for me. And you know, as I look across at the program, it looks like a lot of great offerings for you guys, and I hope you've gotten a lot out of the program today. I couldn't help crosswalking the program to the major work of the grade in the Common Core, and I noticed it was great to see that, you know, of those programs that mentioned content, there were 14 of them. 11 out of the 14 were about the major work of the grades, and that tells me that people are really investing in enhancing their own knowledge and capacity to do a great job with this work. And there were about, another half dozen or so that were, you know, about important issues like performance tasks and so on, that, you know, it's hard to tell from the description how concentrated those are in major work. But, you know, I have this crazy idea that one day the NCTM annual conference, at every session there will be a little green square or blue square or yellow circle, or maybe multiple of them. And that way you could imagine that the flow of people through the conference can start to begin to match the contours of the flow of major work of each grade. And that we would all, you know, also our extracurricular and professional learning would be mimicking the kind of dedication to these intricate, difficult, and necessary ideas that we're asking of our students. So it was great to see, and I hope and trust that people learn some things that they can take back with them throughout the conference today. I want to pivot a little bit. This morning I said, you know, I like to keep my head down and work with teachers and work on tools, work with districts and states and the assessment consortia, and everybody else is trying to actually do the work. But sometimes politics does rear its head, and we had a lot of conversations about that when I met with community and business leaders this morning. And it seemed appropriate to say that since we're all working so hard to make this vision a reality for kids, that we be not unaware that there are people who are working as hard as us to dismantle this vision for kids, and that we might take it on ourselves to pay attention to that and do something with it. And I thought maybe I could provide just a few messages and resources and ideas about that kind of thing. Granting again that I'm sort of more of a math person than an advocacy person, but let's look at a few things to know about the standards. Research shows that the math standards are world-class. Peer-reviewed research by a leading expert on international mathematics performance has compared the grades and the topics in the Common Core to the high-performing countries in grades K through 8, and found that the agreement with high-performing countries was very high. Higher, in fact, than any previous state standards. So when you hear people say, these are dumbed down, they're not internationally benchmarked, they're way behind, research shows that to be false. No state's previous standards were as close a match to the high-performing countries as the Common Core. The same study showed that the degree of similarity of a state's previous standards to the Common Core was a significant predictor of the previous state's NAEP scores. States whose previous standards tended to match the Common Core better tended to have higher NAEP scores. Research shows that the math standards are world-class. The standards are endorsed by math experts. I show an excerpt here a letter signed by the presidents of every major mathematical society in America, saying, "These rigorous new standards hold the promise of elevating the mathematical knowledge and skill of every young American to levels competitive with the best in the world." President of the American Mathematical Association, President of the American Mathematical Society, President of the American Statistical Association, President of the Association for Symbolic Logic, President of the Association for Women in Mathematics, President of the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, President of the Association of State Supervisors of Mathematics, the Benjamin Banneker Association, the Institute of Mathematical Statistics, the Mathematical Association of America, the National Association of Mathematicians, the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics, and TOTOS, Mathematics for All. I tried to give a sense earlier today of the unprecedented expertise that went into the development effort. Professional research mathematicians, Hung-Chi Wu from Berkeley, Sibylla Beckman from Georgia, Solomon Friedberg of Boston College. Many others' work went into this document at an unprecedented level. You can read, if you Google these folks, you can read editorials that they've written in favor of the standards. The math standards are rigorous in all the ways that everyday people who pay their taxes to make education happen expect them to be. They expect students to know the addition table and the multiplication table from memory. Yes, that's a flashcard. Fluency with the standard algorithm for each operation. I'm not aware of any previous state standards that sets these expectations with anything like the clarity and specificity of the Common Core. So when you hear people say this is fuzzy math, they don't know what they're talking about. In the 2010 Fordham Institute review, the Common Core got full marks for content and rigor. Common Core is good for STEM. You can read an editorial by Craig Barrett, a former professor of engineering, former head of the pioneering chipmaker Intel, responding to some of the comments we hear from some critics or commentators. You can feel his frustration here when he talks about a former high school French and German teacher questioning how leaders of the major STEM companies could possibly support the standards. He says, well, she could have asked. And he goes on to list a number of reasons why people in his position feel this is a good idea. Among them, the Common Core will prepare more students, his italics, to take advanced math coursework. Students who have mastered the Common Core will be ready to take higher-level math coursework in high school and college, enabling them to pursue the career of their choice, including STEM fields. States and districts have to continue supporting students who are pursuing STEM fields. As I've said many times, I think states should consider having standards for calculus, and they should certainly provide guidance to districts about pathways leading to calculus in the senior year for all students who are able to succeed on that pathway, as some states have done both of these things. Let me just review those messages. Important things to know. Research shows the standards are world-class, and I don't just announce the standards are world-class. I say research shows the standards are world-class. Why do I say that? One reason I say that is that I've been present at state testimony where critics of the standards counter this idea by citing an online news article. So it's important to consider the strength and source of evidence. Research shows the math standards are world-class. Standards are endorsed by math experts. The math standards are rigorous. I give the page numbers. Bill Bennett, a strong conservative, at one point, I believe I read something of his where he was on a radio show and he was saying, you know, people are going to debate about this, they should at least be pointing to the document. The Common Core is good for STEM. For what it's worth, I taught hundreds of engineering students at UC Berkeley myself in physics. Going forth and using your voice, I have a few ideas that I would suggest and ask people to do with their voluminous free time. Keep up with the news. Here are a couple of Twitter handles. Achieve the Core is Student Achievement Partners. Has a Twitter handle called Achieve the Core with updates. Core advocates, many of whom, are there core advocates in this room? Great. And so that following core advocates, there is news there. Illustrative Mathematics, their handle. These are largely mathematical and substantive, although they sometimes spread interesting news. I support CCSS is a handle that has to do with current affairs to some extent. For example, here is the Twitter feed for that, and it's tweeting a picture of superintendents in Wisconsin. It says, I've never seen so many Wisconsin superintendents outside of an education conference. They're all here testifying that they don't want to go back on Common Core because there's a state bill in Wisconsin. Here's some nice, sophisticated work by a second grade student someone took a picture of and tweeted out. So that's I support CCSS. There are some newsletters. Achieve and the Council of Chief State School Officers put out some newsletters by email that you can subscribe to. And so in a recent one here were some featured articles. Why I'm optimistic about standards-based reform, Common Core critical to preparing students, what the Common Core actually looks like in everyday classrooms. A Common Core math class where students, quote, complain with smiles. I guess that's about productive struggle. Bill Gates, why the Common Core makes common sense to him, and on and on. And so there are articles, and as well as the Achieve thing. So, you see something in one of these areas and be heard. So tweet it out and share the best of what you hear. Answer with evidence. Sometimes we have large networks on Facebook and other platforms and Twitter, and people will say things that are perhaps mythical, or perhaps uninformed, or perhaps could benefit from more information. And I would say don't let them sit there and be unanswered. Answer and speak up, and answer factually and calmly with evidence. Let your leaders know what you believe and why, because I guarantee you critics are letting their leaders know what they believe and why. And posting to forums is another level up, but I support the commoncore.net has a feature where you can share your stories of how it's going for you and as a teacher. So keeping up with the news and being heard. There are resources for business and community leaders. I chose one here. Businessforcore.org is a production of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, the foundation associated with the Chamber of Commerce. And you can see they have myths versus facts. They have an e-toolkit for helping people communicate with employees and peers and others. They have news and a blog and videos and other resources, and also state-specific information, because often what's going on is state-specific. On Achieve the Core, there is, at the bottom of the page, there's a link for parents and community members, and there's a wide range of things there that you could look at. But if you wanted to give something to a parent. I myself learned about businessforcore.org through this CCSSO newsletter. So, things just come across your transom. It's not like I obsessively read these things. There's a lot of things in my email inbox that are not opened, but something will catch your eye, and so it's nice to have it coming through. And I just want to leave you, and then we'll open it up again to questions, with this quotation from the Common Core. These standards are not intended to be new names for old ways of doing business. It's time to recognize that standards are not just promises to our children, but promises we intend to keep. And in the interim, I turned the staircase green, because I thought that was more appropriate in terms of matching the major work. So that's what I have for you in terms of takeaways. And before I turn the mic to you, as it were, I just want to point out that these messages, they're not tested. I'm not a communications expert, but they're important facts, and you can learn them. You can learn them so that when people are talking about it, you can give them facts. And so they're meant to be learnable in a few. I can talk if people are interested. I can also talk if people want to say, I heard that the Common Core is low-level workforce development. That's something you'll often see in websites that are kind of anti-Common Core. What do you think about that? I'm happy to talk about any other things. But I prefer to talk in terms of positive messages here. But I'm happy also to respond to things that people hear. But anyway, I know that after a day of luxuriating in the beauty of mathematics, it's a little bracing to be talking about a political movement. But I again want to say that I think to preserve all the hard work that you're doing, it's worth a little investment. Your leaders want to hear from teachers in your state. In my view, they don't really want me to show up at a congressional hearing and testify. They want to hear from you. How is it going for you? How is this better for your students, their constituents? So I think that as politics heats up over the next year, your voices are going to be very important. So that's what I had for that. And I just want to thank you again for this wonderful day, and we'll spend the rest of our time. I can answer your questions. Thanks. Are there any questions that are top of people's mind after you've had a couple? I see, wow, a hand just shot up in yellow back there. And I'll try to repeat the questions this time.
This might be political, but recently there's been some announcements in the news about the SAT score, or the SAT test being changed, and Nevada High School proficiency examination passing score being lowered to what would be less than half. How does that match with this push for more rigor and Common Core?
I don't know. So the question was, last week in the news, a big news story in education was overhaul of the SAT. And then the second story was about a high school proficiency test with a cut score being lowered. I'm not familiar with the second story. I can't speak to it. Do people hear about the SAT story? So I'm familiar with that. My short view is that the changes that the College Board is making are going to make this test a better match to the true demands of college and careers. And that, if you look, for example, they're going to have more applied problems, they're going to have a no calculator section, the reading and writing are going to have to be grounded in evidence. This is what kids need after high school. So I think these changes are going to make the test a better match to the challenges kids are going to face. I think it's also important that the test is, to put it crudely, becoming less of an IQ test and will reward students for working on the math that matters most. So I see these as very positive developments. And I can take follow-up questions about the SAT matter too, but yes?
About 2 weeks ago, the NEA came out with a statement about a course correction is needed for the Common Core. It's not as though the NEA withdrew support for the Common suggested a course correction. Can you comment about that, what you can expect might come from that?
So the NEA has a statement using the phrase course correction on Common Core. I can't speak to it not having read it. I do know that that both national teachers unions and many local teachers unions are concerned that at a moment when they're being asked to take a leap and try new things and learn new things, learn new math, learn new methods, and do harder work on a steeper staircase, that there be some recognition of that in terms of accountability policies. We've seen, I think, in New York State, some conflict around that. And my understanding is that New York State has, I don't know what the right word is, pause or holding pattern. New York State has addressed those concerns, I believe, by pausing or moderating their previous accountability system so that the standards can go forward. In other words, I read what they have said. You know, the headlines when New York State made their announcement were, New York pulls back on Common Core. I read it as quite the opposite. I read it as New York moderates their accountability policies so as not to pull back on Common Core. Right? Keeping the standards separate from the testing. So, and it could be that a number of states will find themselves in that same position. I don't know the NEA's position. My organization works very closely with both Dennis and his team and Randy and her team. And so I don't want to get out in front of any comments that I haven't read. Yes, in the back.
I've been doing some reading about other countries that are higher performing than the United States, and reading that they do not assess their kids as often and with as many different tests as we do, such as math and CRTs. If you could make your dream assessment, what would that look like, and how often would it be done in your school?
Gosh, when I study other countries, I'm often looking at grades, topics, and highly mathematical issues. When I look at TIMSS or PISA, the exams, I published an analysis of PISA relative to the Common Core on behalf of OECD on PISA data. When I do that kind of thing, I'm mostly thinking math. However, there are many, many people, I imagine in fact many more people, who, when they do comparisons between the US and other countries, are looking at ecosystem factors, policy factors, how are the teachers trained, what is the education system like, what is the accountability like, and one source for information along those lines is National Center for Education and the Economy. They have a newsletter that they put out where they describe the different systems that are in place, and and every country does things differently. I think it's probably accurate to say that American-style accountability is rare outside America. That's, I'm half informed on that, so I'd gladly be corrected about it. Now, I think assessment is important. We need to know how we're doing, we need to know how to get better. And we can't do that without assessment, and we can't do that without external assessment. And we can't do that without honest accountability to ourselves and to our students and to each other. So I think these are complex questions. There's a lot of dialogue that goes on between district leaders and union leaders and policymakers about what the right mix is. I think people are still struggling to find the right mix after a decade of NCLB. I think there's widespread agreement that that generation and model has played its part and needs to evolve. But I think we're still waiting to see what that evolution is like, partly because the Common Core has thrown a bit of a monkey wrench into it, because now we've changed the expectations which in a way changes the contract. So I think it's a highly uncertain time. Now you say ideal test. Ideal test. I think there are many, if I'm talking about a high stakes test even, or just a very simple case of a summative assessment, there are a number of considerations that I think have to be met. One expression of this is the standards themselves, of course, and if you are on Achieve the Core, you can see an assessment evaluation tool parallel to the instructional materials evaluation tool that has criteria for whether tests are quality and aligned. So you'll see things that you'd expect to see, like 75% or more of the points are on the major work of the grade, things that have to be true in order for you all not to be penalized for focusing the way the standards are asking you to. So there are big architectural things like that matter fundamentally. There needs to be a range of, for lack of a better word, kind of mathematical complexity of the tasks. They can't all be highly simplistic or simple or short mathematical tasks, or that begins to exert a whitening, deadening effect on the curriculum. On the other hand, those problems also have to be present because kids deserve credit for learning the simple basics of the grade. Designing an assessment is a series of trade-offs, very hard trade-offs. And so one best answer I could give would be to have a look at the assessment evaluation tool that's online. We certainly are going to be looking at the consortia and other vendors and other states through that lens ourselves as much as possible to understand whether things are getting better. I do think it's very hard to imagine that the mathematics on tests is not going to get better as a result of the Common Core. I think there are a lot of challenges with assessment, that we have to take them on computers is a big challenge, that, or that at least within the two consortia, the idea is to take them on computers. There are a lot of logistical challenges, but in terms of the blueprints of what the two assessment consortia have done, I think they're light years ahead of where blueprints were from the major vendors 5 years ago. Okay. Yeah, any last question? We could take one more if anyone has a question. If they've been shy or wondering about it. Could be off topic, a new topic, lighthearted topic. Okay. Well, it's been a long and great day, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you so much.